Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Idea Roastery. I'm Jason.
And I'm Harmon.
So I am a little bit concerned. Uh,
Oh, yeah?
yeah. So there's this thing called AI, right? And
Oh, shit. What's that? I haven't heard about AI at all ever, especially not in the last year.
and we were talking last time about writing, and one of the things that AI has recently learned to do is write. And so that begs the question: what's the internet going to look like after AI is everywhere?
I mean, if you take a look at Google right now, I'd say like the first two pages of Google are arguably AI generated. But if you're asking about how I think the internet will look in a couple of years because of the proliferation of
Exactly.
especially these LLMs, and this is actually a fascinating thing. It's going to be like bots talking to bots. But the crazy thing is that they're going to be talking to each other in English, right? Which is so absurd. It's like the least efficient way for computers to communicate with each other through natural language.
Yeah.
And because we built the internet for people and now have bots on the internet,
Yeah.
it's like they're all communicating terribly inefficiently.
Yeah, it's almost like a comic, right?
And the amount of compute that is going to go into these bots talking to bots in natural language. I mean, like a API request on, your little VPS that serves the correct amount of information to the correct place. It's like the amount of compute and therefore energy and stuff that requires is so minuscule. Whereas if it actually the request has to go into an LLM that's, in these big data farms and blah, 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 and they put it all together, make it fluent English, send it back. It's like we've created the most inefficient system.
Yeah, and it's going to be trying to grab our attention left, right, and center. So here's what I was thinking the other day. I think I was chatting to one of my colleagues at work about it actually. So there's like this lawsuit going on with OpenAI and the New York Times, right? So the idea is around copyright, and we've done an episode a couple of sessions ago on open source, right? So the idea is, and I've kind of playing around with the idea of calling it time arbitrage
Okay.
for content. So the idea is that these days, if you're a journalist or you're someone who writes stuff, what you do is you sit down and it takes you an amount of time to create a piece of content. And, you create a book, and arguably that's a copyrighted book that you can have, some sort of agency over for a period of time. Right. So now let's take a large language model. Let's train it on open commons data, right? But let's get it like really, really good. So it's not infringed on any copyright as of yet, right? But then what you do is you have it monitor things like Twitter, and as soon as there's like a post, it like generates like 20 or 100 articles about that item or whatever event has happened, right? And so you create a news site. So I create Jason News, and I have like a couple of LLM writers that like monitor activity and like generate 100 articles every time it picks up something. And then what I do is any traditional news outlet that goes and writes something about it, I will then go to them and I'll say, hey, mister, you're copywriting my stuff, because I'll also have a model that will detect plagiarism from my content. And so the idea is that it's basically taking.
So you're like becoming a big old ransom.
So it's like patent trolling, but with copyright. And the interesting element that I thought about is that there's that time difference, right? So there's something about the time it takes to create a piece of content that is valuable, right? Or it creates some sort of opportunity, right? So someone who's working late at night, they're like, they'll stay up all night writing that piece of like news article, and they'll get it out the next day. They'll sell like loads of newspapers or whatever. But now you could just do it within a fraction of a second and at a fraction of the cost. What does that mean for writers, and what does that mean for copyright? What is that going to mean for what the internet's going to look like?
It's messed up. So I think that we're going to have to rewrite a bunch of our laws around copyright in general. And we're seeing a big push especially in the United States, around that because of how these LLMs and image generation and soon to be video and animation generation work. As far as I understand, the first ruling was something along the lines of AI generated content cannot be copywritten. So that does go and protect against the hypothetical ransom that you're trying to stick over there. But it's like you could arguably say like, oh no, I wrote these all myself,
Yeah,
right? And there's no definitive way for people to be like, nope, that's AI written because you can't really fingerprint this
yeah.
stuff, right?
It's like I wrote a book and that people like start coming after me like, no, it's too good. It must be AI generated. And like,
Yeah.
what? No, dude, I'm just like that clever. Like I wrote that myself.
So I was out to dinner last week with a chap who runs, let's call it a digital marketing agency. And what I'm going to describe, this is what he's been doing for the last week or two. It is, I would arguably say, not unethical, but it's definitely gaming a system to the detriment of the system, right? So you're familiar with SEO optimization techniques. You go and like you also go and find long tail keywords that few people search for, but then you optimize content for that. And if you have a big enough scale of content for those long tail keywords, you can get a decent amount of traffic on like less competitive things because they show up higher on Google and other search engines. So he wrote a couple of scripts that go and let's say, for instance, one of their clients is a company that sells coffee mugs. They will it'll run a script that'll go and figure out what all the least competitive long tail keywords are, thousands of, long tail keywords, and then it will go and generate an article for each of them. And and these are all relevant to the company. All of them are about coffee cups, right? And then it will publish it all to the company's blog automatically, and then it will also in some way like
Yeah,
notify Google that this page is ready to get
yeah,
crawled,
yeah,
or it will submit it to the Google Search Console. And so that's a big old automated thing. But it also goes to show that like search engines are dying. I barely Google anything anymore unless I am looking for a specific site, but I'm never Googling information because it's all just this goop that's optimized to rank well on Google to market something else, right? And I think that we are seeing an erosion of these spaces on the internet that we
yeah,
really appreciated. It's like, do you remember back in the early days of the internet, especially when like IRC was big and it's like you had good communities and you had these curated environments. And then we realized that there is high value to spam, right? I hate to say that, but like there is
Is
a
that the first thing that they realized? No, no, no. It was. I mean, like the idea was like it was more decentralized, right? Like you could kind of spin up your own community, right? But then the spammers saw the value in that, right? Um, I don't know what the origins of spam is. I guess people were just like trying to advertise to people on the internet, right?
yeah, I
So
mean it just started out as advertising,
as
right?
like a random endpoint or like a random email address, you're just doing like a cold outreach to say,
Yeah.
hi, like, do you want to buy my product, right? Similar to how like, someone might accost you as you're like trying to walk down the street to like, try and sell you a
Yeah.
pamphlet.
I guess it's all about a threshold. Or like once it goes past the threshold, it's spam. Otherwise, it's just regular advertising.
Yeah. But it's like regular advertising, but then it's own like as the medium became less and less effective, the way to combat that was with scale, right? So the more people you can like
Yeah.
get into this net, and then I guess the communities move from like private to being more public, right? Like with things like Reddit, where kind of anyone can just join in, right?
So I think that Reddit, you're correct. People moved over to centralized systems like your Reddits and your Facebooks and your um, everything else, all the other social medias. But I think Reddit is actually a really interesting one because yes, it is centralized big tech, However, because each subreddit is community moderated, it actually has a surprisingly small amount of spam, right?
Hmm.
Whereas, Twitter, I would say, is mostly spam. Like most people who are, okay,
Well, I
okay,
mean,
I'd say most posts on
yeah,
Twitter. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have reach because people aren't necessarily following
yeah,
accounts that just post out spam. Um,
yeah,
but I'd say that most of the content on the internet in general is some or other form of spam. I know on my blogging platform Bear is I've had to put so many anti-spam measures in place. I've got AI that goes and checks whether new blogs are spammy and blocks them. I have a manual review process where I, you know, approve blogs that get started, and I also have community like flagging features so people can
mm,
flag whether, blogs have popped up that are trying to sell like Xanax online and stuff like that.
mm,
And the reason is that the incentives all point in that direction. It's virtually free outside of the time commitment to go and, post stuff all over these
yeah.
public bulletins all over the internet. And in so doing, it kind of like erodes what makes the internet cool and good.
But I think it goes a little bit. I mean, it's a little bit more of a spectrum than that, right? Because
Mm.
I think it is. I agree that there's like the ads on Twitter are like pretty bad, like or X, sorry, formerly Twitter.
Sorry.
But the ads are quite like annoying, right? Because they're trying to sell like some doohickey that's like just a drop shipped from China, which is like a poor product. But what I think is a little bit more annoying or more like nuanced is that there's this idea of like sort of attention farming. So what you do is in order, you know, everyone's got this idea that they're going to have this big Twitter account and then they'll be able to be an influencer, right? But the way to be an influencer is that you need to, because of the algorithms that are involved, is you need to be commenting on other people who are like in your niche that are like more popular. So I don't know if you noticed this. There's a couple of Twitter pages like Massimo Cultural Tutor who just like post facts, right? And what you'll notice is like the fact is like interesting, but then right below it there'll be like three or four like tweets or posts below it that are about a similar topic, but that are like slightly different. And you'll see that the name is like, Bob Facts or someone like, and what I think they're doing is that I can't confirm this. They might just be very interesting people. But what I imagine they're doing is that they're crawling Twitter, they're seeing a post, getting a language model to generate something that's interesting, that's related to that post,
Hmm.
and then they'll post it as like a comment. And so they're trying to get engagement, and so boost their own following. So it's almost like they're not spamming, but they're trying to improve their following count by doing this sort of disingenuous kind of comment approach, right? And so it's more like people just trying to like use the system, but I think it ends up being like a bad experience for the general user, almost to the extent that now I've sort of blocked a few of the like new facts people because it's basically just regurgitating what I've seen before.
So prior to this podcast, I was reading an article called "Everyone Has to Self-Promote Now and Nobody Wants to."
Yeah.
And so it's like if you are a artist or a musician, you can't afford to not have a TikTok and an Instagram, right? If you
Yeah.
I at one point I thought about writing a book and I went and took a look at like publishing agents and everything, and all of them have a requirement to have a big following on social media. Now, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on any of these social medias,
Mm.
right? So automatically, I guess it doesn't exclude me, but it highly disincentivizes them from working with me because, they
Mm.
want that guarantee that I've got an audience that I can sell to, right? And so because of having to self-promote all the time in this really noisy world, of course people are going to try and find those tricks and tips and stuff, right? I saw an interesting one the other day,
Yeah.
and I've actually seen this on YouTube quite a bit. So, but I saw it really, really well executed. Um, there's this one fairly popular YouTube channel called Jerry Rig Everything, and he like he converted a
Mhm.
military Hummer into an electric vehicle, and he runs a company that makes affordable wheelchairs and stuff like that. Cool content. I think he made his channel big off of like breaking down iPhone or like new phones, like completely pulling them apart. But I went down to
Yeah.
the comments, and there's some really good comments that are topical, right? And then there would be really good comments that are
Mhm.
incredibly topical, but the icon of that person is like really hot,
Oh yeah.
right? And but they'd like engage in a completely technical fashion with the content of the
Yeah.
video. And just out of curiosity, I went and I clicked on their YouTube profile, and then it takes it to the YouTube profile, which obviously sends it off to an OnlyFans or a
Yeah.
website chat. What are they called? Cam girls,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. And on closer inspection of all the pictures of them, they're all AI generated.
Mm.
And the content is also AI generated. They don't have a person who's engaging on a technical topic over there. What they do is they just parse all of the comments that currently exist, create a really good sounding comment, which tends to be on point because it's just the aggregate of everyone who's commented on
Yeah.
the thing already. And so you've just got these bots that are sitting there posting comments on YouTube with the hopes that someone will see that they've got a pretty good looking icon,
Yeah.
click on it, and then it'll take them to the cam girl site or
Yeah.
whatever it is they're selling. Um, and so, from the early days of the internet through to now, we've just seen like marketing, and that's what it is. It's marketing has just evolved. Like banners don't work anymore.
Yeah.
Even when I was in first year university, everyone was talking about banner blindness.
Mm.
And man, I haven't seen like banner ads in years because I've got very strict ad blockers.
Well, you obviously haven't been onto any recipe website recently because they're fucking all over
I
the
did. I
place.
just asked ChatGPT, is like, hey man, how do I make a good
Yeah.
ramen?
Actually, actually like I think we spoke about it once, but I saw someone's recently created I think they just call it like just recipes or something where it's just like recipes and like no ads, no like extra stuff. And I'm just like, thank goodness. It's such a good idea.
My girlfriend and I started a little recipe blog that's also super no nonsense. It was called Cuties
Yeah.
Making Foodies. Uh,
Nice.
but we're not food photographers. So like
Yeah.
recipe books and recipe websites, first you have to go through all the SEO goop at the front where they tell you their life story and like how to select the ripest of the bananas. And then you get to
Yeah.
the actual, which is another example of like optimizing not for people but for the algorithm. But they take fantastic pictures, like professional photography, a little bit of like cardamom
Mm.
that's spilled over the side of the bowl onto the, dried fig. And with me, it's like bowlless slop. It's really tasty slop, but it's like bad lighting. It looks a little bit gray in the light. I'm like, this is some
Oh yeah.
tasty shit, but like you wouldn't know from the picture.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I mean like advertising is definitely yeah, it's something that people need to do, right? Like anyone yourself like starting a business, like we can't really hate the players necessarily. It's more about how the game is rigged. And what's I think is a little bit like annoying and kind of sad is that like you can tell that at the end of the day it's just there's some metric that some like person is like trying to boost,
Optimized
right?
for, yeah.
And so they're basically generating all of this stuff. And I can imagine it even gets to the point where you're not even like monitoring that system. You're just like
Mm,
letting it run, and like you're just like checking in every month to see how many followers you have as like a kind of just
yeah.
running a little experiment here. But the thing is like it's kind of like junking up the internet, right? And for I guess the old internet buddies, which I think we're kind of
Yeah,
heading into
yeah,
that
yeah.
territory, is like it's kind of annoying because it's you're losing like that sort of funness of exploring, meeting new people, like understanding ideas, like original content. I mean, AI can also generate original content, I guess, but like
But it's shit. Like you can say it.
yeah, I'll land on an article and it's like you like start reading it and it's like it's not getting to the point. Okay, like I'm trying to figure out like what's the deal with this like protein or whatever, like what's the deal, and you can say like
Trying to get that word counting.
yeah, at the end, I mean people did that before AI, right, as well, like they wrote really long
Yeah.
articles.
AI is just again like taking it to the next level. It's like, you know, we managed to kill one another perfectly well before we invented nuclear weapons,
Yeah,
but nuclear weapons, rarely like made it
yeah.
quite efficient.
So what is the where is it going? Like, I mean the place we could like I kind of think about is, as you said, like walled gardens, right? Like closed off areas. But I mean there's even elements of that, right? Like, Apple is supposedly meant to be like the granddaddy of walled gardens, but
That's more in like an ecosystem kind of thing. I think when we talk about walled gardens in this context, it's more talking of like a social walled garden, a digital social walled garden.
I think it's no, I think it's similar, right? Because like if you think of an app as like something, there's a vetting process, right? With any
Mm,
sort of walled garden, you've got the Reddit moderators, you've got the iStore people that are like checking each
yeah.
app. There's an element of like self checking. Maybe there's like a tribal checking where like people in the tribal like,
Yeah,
hey, this guy needs to be stoned, and like everyone will like kick him
yeah.
out and he'll be banned, like which is how it was in the old days, right? You got like there's always some joker who came into the forum and like 2 comments later they were banned.
Yeah.
And but yeah, yeah, like is that where we're heading to, where we're just going to have this sort of wall garden approach, and then is that going to be the internet that we love?
Yeah, I think that the key word of here is curation. Is I think we're moving into an age of curation. And not only do I think we're doing it just because it's nice, it's like it's almost mandatory. If you don't have curation, you're only going to get shit. And so, you have news aggregators like Hacker News or Lobsters for the more, hardcore programmers. And these are all like community moderated based on upvote systems that they actively work on to prevent bots from going and just skewing the results. You'll see, I think that again, Reddit has a fairly good model because it's got actual volunteer human moderators. And yes, Reddit does get a lot of shit and people say that it's worse, but it's like it could be so much worse. Right. And I think if you find the right community on Reddit,
Mm,
awesome. Good for you. Um, I
mm,
think that broader public forums are going to struggle. Uh, I know that Twitter is in their ongoing bot war, and I think that it's just going to be a an arms race forever. The bots are going to get smarter. The Twitter employees are going to put in more measures to prevent bots. And as it goes on and on, what happens is it actually degrades the
mm,
user experience. So I found this myself with curating Bear is the I can either have no spam, but also make the sign up process like arduous or require payment, right? Or I can have like some spam like
mm,
slip through the cracks, but also have a better user experience. And I have to like really balance that trade-off over there. And that's going to be the case with Twitter
yeah,
as well. They're never going to get rid of bots, but they're going to have to figure out how to manage them as best they can.
yeah. Maybe like another thing I was just thinking of, it probably doesn't really work, is like an invite only system, right? So imagine you had a social media app, and the only way you could join it is if someone invited you. Obviously it's not like a free and open system. It's like getting more into the realm of like, oh, there's this like secret society and no one's allowed in, like let's
Yeah.
let's kind of talk about them.
I think that's kind of how Lobsters works. If you want to submit articles to Lobsters, I think you have to get an invite.
What's lobsters?
It's a news aggregator,
Okay,
kind of like Hacker News, but it's
okay,
not like a public. You can't just go and sign up. I think you actually have to be invited to it.
yeah,
So it is definitely a smaller community. The viewing of Lobsters is completely public, but I think the submitting of articles to it is by invite only.
mm,
My thinking is just that like when the bot goes in there and starts inviting all of its all of its other bots,
yeah.
or just spinning up multiple accounts that it can invite itself.
Or just someone who starts off writing like themselves, but then starts using it like an AI for it.
Yeah.
I think it's also like worrying, is like because these language models are so convincing at like creating an like a a narrative or like writing. I think it's like it's very easy to kind of get tricked into like certain data being true when it, or like the way that it could present an argument might be like, you know, factually or logically incorrect, right? Because these models are not necessarily based on logic, they're
Yeah.
based on like fooling people into thinking they text.
What word comes next? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what word comes next? And maybe there is an element of its understanding like logic, like, you know, all cats are black, like is this cat black, right, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's pretty good evidence to suggest that like sufficiently advanced transformer models do have logic. I mean, I'm using it as a math tutor in my new company. So like there's definitely a logical structure to it.
Mm.
Is it always right? No, but like there is some underlying simulation of reasoning that when it goes through the process of simulating reasoning, it comes up with reasonable reasons. So it does do something akin to reasoning.
I guess the thing also is maybe towards like attribution and like verification, right? So there's this thing in email.
Mm,
It's like PGP or
like the signatures.
yeah. So basically, there's a process where you can sign your emails and you can kind of verify that this email came from this person. So maybe in a similar sense to the curation idea that you had earlier, it's almost like you would have, you know, a signature assigned to your blog or your sort of channel, and then people could verify that this came from this
Mm,
person, and then the idea would be that you would just have to build some sort of trust in that source. So whether it's, you know, consistent, you know, well formed arguments, you know, even if it's an AI, I would argue like if you can, if it is succinct and it is informative and it does like provide you some value, you could still trust in what type of content it is. You might not 100% trust the actual underlying data, but you might still enjoy the stories of an LLM. And so you would trust in that LLM's signature, right? So anything that comes from,
yeah.
you know, LLM storyteller, you know, .ai, like whatever, you'd trust in that, but you'd still have trust of humans and you'd have trust of this like AI generated content. And so maybe that's where you have some sort of verification on the content that's created, or it gets embedded into like the actual sort of hardware, right? So
Yeah.
similar to like digital media rights, right? Where you like put a stamp on everything that's AI generated or not, right? Maybe that's the way that you can have an internet where you can at least have like a flag, maybe that it's maybe generated with AI.
Yeah. I think that and this is just the Luddite in me just coming out, but I think that as online communication becomes more and more noisy and online relationships become more and more fraught with the potential that you actually don't have a relationship with a person, but it's an AI that has tricked you, I'm just tempted to say like, hey, for socializing, just go back to the real world. And then you can like meet up with those people online, but
Yeah,
you've already verified that they exist. Like pure online
yeah,
relationships. They're a they're a hallmark of, you know, all generations since 1990. And the I think that there's a good chance that they're going to die out. This is just pure speculation. Who knows? Maybe we'll find a way to like fingerprint like proof of humanity at some point. Um,
yeah. I mean, I like that, right? I like the idea that, I mean, I feel it myself. Maybe it could be getting older, or it could be just like, you know, the internet's just getting more trashy. So like, it would be
yeah.
interesting if like there's so much noise that it just pushes people to actually go and meet in person. And I feel like there's an element of like the social dynamic, and I think that the younger generations, like is it Gen Zs or Gen Y, what Gen Zs are like, I think they are catching on like, hey, I shouldn't spend my whole time online,
Mhm,
you know,
mhm.
like that's a bit, you know, creepo. I'm gonna go and do like actual things. And so I kind of like that trend, but I think it's there's still going to be a monetary incentive to be online for like a very long time, I think. And
Yeah.
so I think maybe we'll just get to a point where you could have your moneymaker AI bot that you just run on the internet, and then you go off and it just lands in your bank account, and you don't know how it's making money, but it's making money somehow. And it might be that you've got some AI machine that's reading it and paying like a token every time you like reads your content. And then it's just like AI generated UBI or something like that.
Yeah. It's like completely off topic, but um, there is a good chance that, or actually, I'd say that if you are a pure knowledge worker, that in many ways, like GPT-4 is better than the average worker. It just doesn't have the ability to function multimodally. Like it can't read emails and send emails, yet it's not an independent agent, right? But as soon as it does have the ability to be an independent agent, and people are working on, making them more agentic, um, it might actually be more efficient than you.
Yeah. I mean, like, don't, yeah, just like if you can use the system, like, why not, right?
Yeah.
It's like if something's available, it's like, and you choose to not use it, like that's your own fault. And I guess that's the same, you know, talk that you would have as like someone who's generating SEO content, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, if it's a mechanism, it's not illegal. It is something that can generate you more traffic to your website and convert. Then, like, if you've got the means, you know how to do it, why not, right? Because there's nothing really illegal about it.
Yeah. I'd say like still, act within your own moral framework.
I mean, like, yeah, I get, you know, you never know people's
Yeah,
circumstances,
yeah, yeah.
right? But like, but I do agree. It's a very sort of winding path that we're going to see here over the next couple of years. Um, but I think also on top of all of this, like, although I'm like fairly skeptical, I personally think uh, it would be very sad to see LLM research being hampered by something as lame as like legal issues.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the copyright case, I I mean I know you probably are more on the side of the creator. I kind of do too.
You know what? To be entirely honest, I'm not. Is like the fact of the matter is that open source models are already out on the market, right? And so New York Times just going after OpenAI is like I understand the reason why you're doing it, and I do understand like, hey, we need to protect creators. However, this technology fundamentally does not protect creators, and it is going to be in the hands of everyone very, very soon, in the same way that like the Luddites are a great example of this. They were weavers and they made cloth. And then automation started coming in, so they started burning down the textile mills. And they coordinated really well, and they did a really good job at hampering that process. However, in the end, the like there was no way that textile manufacture, well, like loom, like proper industrialized textile manufacturing was not going to win in the
Yeah,
end.
yeah. I think it's more. Yeah, it's like it's hard to almost put the genie back in the bottle, and I think it's,
Exactly.
yeah, like there's elements where I feel like it's just like an old industry that can't innovate, that's kind of being taken over as your example. But I mean, it's, yeah.
I think that there's a I've got, yeah, one last point that we can end off on over here is that prior to search engines, writing was done as writing interesting things for people to read,
Hmm.
right? And then as soon as search engines came around, most writing is actually done to is to optimize the algorithm for visibility, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that we're going to come full circle with this AI generated content in that, well, writers won't have to write for algorithms anymore. And yes, we're going to see a lot of writers not be writers anymore, but it means that the people who are still writers are very, very much writing for humans and not writing just to
Hmm.
game the system.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the end, folks. If you want to support this podcast, and I certainly hope you do, the best thing you can do is share it with someone who would find our conversation interesting. Catch you next time.